Am I the a-hole? I never thought I'd find myself in this situation. Sitting here, alone in a coffee shop, heart racing and mind spinning, I can't help but wonder, am I the a-hole? It all started 6 months ago when I began to notice the distance between me and my girlfriend, Emily. We had been together for 4 years, and while I loved her deeply, the spark that once ignited our relationship felt dim. Our conversations had dwindled to mundane topics, and our weekends were spent in silence, each absorbed in our own screens. I tried to shake the feeling off, telling myself it was just a rough patch, but deep down I knew something had to change. One night, after a particularly awkward dinner, I decided to go out with friends. We ended up at a bar downtown, where I met Sarah. She was vibrant, with an energy that instantly drew me in. We started chatting, and the chemistry was undeniable. The way she laughed at my jokes and leaned in close as we talked made me feel alive again. I knew it was wrong to feel this way about someone else, but I couldn't help myself. Over the next few weeks, our paths crossed more often. We ran into each other at various events, and each encounter felt electric. I tried to ignore the growing attraction, telling myself I was just being friendly. But one night, after a long day at work, I found myself at a party where Sarah was the life of the room. As the drinks flowed and laughter filled the air, I let my guard down. We ended up on the balcony, the city lights sparkling below us. The conversation flowed effortlessly, and before I knew it, we were standing too close. Then she kissed me, softly, tentatively at first, then with an urgency that took my breath away. I was frozen, torn between the thrill of the moment and the image of Emily waiting for me at home. But the thrill won out, and I kissed her back. After that night, things spiraled quickly. I told myself it was just a one-time mistake, but Sarah and I began texting constantly. Each message felt like a secret thrill, a rush that reminded me of the early days with Emily. I rationalized it, convinced myself it was harmless. After all, I hadn't actually cheated, right? But as the weeks passed, my guilt grew heavier. I found myself lying to Emily about my late nights, crafting excuses about work. The tension between us was palpable. She could sense something was off. I remember one night, she looked at me and asked, "Are you happy?" I hesitated, unsure of how to answer. "Of course," I replied, but inside I felt a gnawing unease. I was living a lie. The more I saw Sarah, the more I felt pulled into a world where I could escape my reality. We would meet for drinks, share intimate conversations, and every stolen moment felt like a high. But every time I looked at my phone, the weight of my deception pressed down on me. I knew I was betraying Emily, but I was too deep in to turn back. Then came the turning point. It was a Saturday afternoon when I got a call from Sarah, asking if I wanted to meet up. I felt a rush of excitement, but then I saw Emily's text. "Can we talk later? I feel like we're drifting apart." My heart sank. I should have canceled with Sarah, but the temptation was too strong. When I met Sarah, we ended up at her apartment. One thing led to another, and soon we were tangled up on her couch, lost in each other. It was intoxicating, a complete escape from reality. But just as it was heating up, I heard my phone buzzing incessantly in my pocket. It was Emily. Panic set in, and I knew I had crossed a line. I pulled away, breathless and terrified. "I can't do this," I said, scrambling to get my clothes back on. I fled her apartment, guilt flooding over me. On the way home, I felt like a ghost, an empty shell of the person I used to be. When I walked through the door, Emily was sitting on the couch, her expression a mix of concern and confusion. "Where were you?" she asked, her voice trembling. I opened my mouth to speak, but nothing came out. I couldn't bring myself to confess. Instead, I lied. "I was out with friends. Sorry I didn't text you back." She nodded, but I could see the hurt in her eyes. We spent the evening in silence, the air thick with unspoken words. Days turned into weeks, and the guilt became unbearable. I felt like I was living two lives, one with Emily, filled with love and memories, and another with Sarah, filled with excitement and deceit. I started to pull away from Sarah, realizing I needed to end things. But every time I tried, she would pull me back in, tempting me with her carefree spirit. Finally, after a sleepless night of wrestling with my conscience, I decided I had to come clean to Emily. I couldn't continue living this lie. That evening, I sat her down and took a deep breath. I need to tell you something, I began, and I watched her face pale as I spoke. By the time I finished, she was in tears. How could you? She whispered. It broke my heart to see the pain I had caused. I